This chapter is interesting because here we can find that Basnet and Lefebvre go beyond language and focus on the interaction between translation and culture, on the way in which culture impacts and constrains translation, and on the larger issues of context, history, and convention. The translation, history, and culture constitutes an important collection in the beginning of a decade or more when the cultural tone has held its way in translation studies. In the course of the 1990s, there were three areas where cultural studies has influenced translation studies. These are translation as rewriting, which is a development of system theory, translation and gender, and translation and postcolonialism. In the translation as rewriting, the work on translation and culture in many ways represents a bridging point to the cultural tone. Lefebvre sees rewriting literature and governing its consumption by the general public, and claims that the same basic process of rewriting is at work in translation, historiography, Anthropologization, Christianism, and editing. This bringing together of studies of original writing and translation shows translation being incorporated into general literary criticism. For Lefebvre, the most important consideration is the ideological one, which in this case refers to the translator's ideology, or the ideology imposed upon the translation by patronage. In the translation and gender, the cultural studies in translation has inevitably taken translation studies away from purely linguistic analysis and brought it into contact with other disciplines. Simon's focus centers on underlining the importance of the cultural tone in translation. In the conclusion to her book, Cultural Studies brings to translation an understanding of the complexities of gender and culture. It allows us to situate linguistic transfer within the multiple post-relatives of today: post-structuralism, post-colonialism, and postmodernism. Simon thus links gender and cultural studies to developments in postcolonialism. The exact scope of postcolonialism is open to some debate. However, it is generally used to cover studies of the history of the former colonies. In the postcolonial translation theory, there are many theories between one language and another. Each language has one way to translate, and each author has their theories. The cultural studies has taken an increasingly interest in translation. One consequence of this widening of the ambit of translation studies is that it has brought together scholars from a wide range of backgrounds. Yet, it is important to remember that cultural theorists themselves that there are ideology and agendas that drive their own criticisms. The linguistic theories of translation are influential with translation studies. To be sure, these new cultural approaches have widened the horizon of translation studies with a wealth of new insights. But there is also a strong element of conflict and competition between them. The linguistic theories of translation have been sidelined, and attention has centered on translation as cultural transfer and the interface of translation with other growing disciplines within cultural studies between translation and culture, on the way in which culture impacts stand, constrains translation, and on the larger issues of context, history, and convention. Thank you so much.